colleague, conceptual art. Conceptual art, what is it? Why do we make conceptual art? That's the biggest question. So I'm Gil Dekel. I'm a doctor in art design and media. I specialize in processes of inspiration and creativity. Let's look at conceptual art. What I'm showing you here is the first example of conceptual art. This thing is a real artwork. It was created in 1967 by an artist who called Richard Long. And it is called A Line Made by Walking. A line which was made simply by walking. So what happened? The artist, he was walking on this field, on the grass, and as you walk, your steps crushes the turf. And then he looked around him and he said, that's interesting. And he turned it into an artwork. A line made by walking. Now, if you ask me, Gil, would you buy this photograph, not the art, but the photograph, would you buy it? Would you print it? Would you hang it in your living room? I would probably say to you, no, I would not do that. Aesthetically, I don't think that this work is accomplished or complete or interesting. But that is not the point. Conceptual art is not about the final result or how it looks. Conceptual art is about the concept, the idea behind it. It has to be intriguing. It has to make you want to ask questions. So, a line made by walking. What is the idea here? What's the concept in this work? What's the big deal? There could be many things. First, you could say that a line should be made by a pen, pencil, or a brush. I never heard of a line which is produced by walking. So that's an interesting concept. Or you can say that the act of walking in itself becoming a form of art. The artists say that purely by walking, it is a form of expressive art. Walking in itself could be art, so that could be the concept in this artwork. The point, what I want to show you, is that in conceptual art, it is the concept behind the things that is more interesting than the actual artwork. I'll show you a few examples and you will see what I mean, and then you will see why all of this is important. Conceptual art, why is it important? Compare with this work, the second slide here, created in 1974. What you actually see in front of you are 3 panels cut out from a house. This is the second panel, this is the third panel. So this artist, Gordon Matta Clark, he went to a house, probably a house that was about to be demolished. He sliced it, literally, what's that, 2 meter by 2 meter. 3 sliced, 1, 2, and 3. He took 3 slices and he brought it to the gallery, and he's calling it art. This is conceptual art. Now again, would I buy this as a photograph and put in my living room? I must say that I do find this interesting aesthetically. I like the little textures that are produced here. I like the materiality of the wood right here, very interesting. I like the skeleton staircase template over there. So it is an interesting, even as a photograph. But that's not the point. The point is the concept behind this project. And what's the concept here in this conceptual art? As you can see here in the quote, why should we hang things on the wall when the wall itself is much more challenging medium, much more interesting? So I'm looking now at the wall in my room right now, and what I notice is that usually I see it as something that is dividing 2 rooms. We think of a wall as a structural thing in our house for the purpose of dividing 2 rooms, and then we say, okay, we have this blank space, let's put painting on it because we look at it all the time. That is a wall in my mind. Whereas this artist is taking out the wall itself and he's telling me, no, look at the wall, look at the materiality of the wall itself. The materiality is far more interesting than what you would put on the wall. So the concept here, the real concept here, is a new observation. Conceptual art gives us insight. It allows us to see things in a different way. So I'm looking at the wall again now in my room, and I'm starting to imagine how the brick is made, or the space between the bricks, all the things that I wouldn't think of usually. Now I start to see them, thanks to this, thanks to the conceptual art. Another work. This is actually performance work, so the artist is a performance artist, but I bring it as an example for conceptual art. What he does here is to dip his hand inside paint. He buys buckets of paint, and as you see, the paint is on his hand, and he would stand just like that. And you would stand here, the viewer would come, you wouldn't know exactly what it means, but the title says wet paint handshake. So you'll come closer to the artist and you'll end up shaking his hand, and the paint will drip, kind of drop on the floor when he looks at you and he smiles. It's a bit awkward and it's funny and amusing. First, I must tell you that this was done years before the current virus. So today, with the COVID-19 virus, nobody will do it. And it's actually interesting to see how the context of art changes. Now we will not do it, but that was done many years ago. And that was fine. Now, I did interview this artist, and you can read the interview here in that link. And I know that the concept here is purely human relations. What the artist, Roy Vahara, the artist, wants to show us, he wants to give us an expression, an experience of human connection. So that is the concept behind this artwork. Visually, it might be interesting. Visually, this work is interesting, but that is not the point. That is not what he is trying to convey. He's trying to convey a concept, some meaning. In this case, human interaction. Compare with this work from the same artist, which is called Follow Me. The artist here, the same artist, Roy Vahara, did something incredible. He's simply holding a sign that says, as you can see, Follow Me. And below here it says in Turkish, Follow Me. That's because it was performed in Turkey. And he's holding a sign, and he starts to walk down the city center with a sign that says, Follow Me. He didn't speak a word, didn't say a thing, and people started to follow him. Now I'm looking at this work and I find it hilarious. It is so amusing, so interesting. There is so much nothingness. Almost, you can say it's totally useless. But then people followed him. Useless, not in a bad way, not in a negative way, but in a way that, what's in it? What's the content here? So what's the concept? Let me ask you, if you want to type in the chat, what do you think the concept in this work would be? Just put a few quick words. Nikki is wondering if it's testing, suggestive. People are very good. Suggestive, how people are suggesting things to others. And again, Susan is saying people are conditioned. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the combination of all that you have just said. It seems to me that this project really is about, well, I should say, for me, it is about the celebrity world. Celebrity, we follow celebrity people, we follow famous people. Why? Purely because they are famous. They're not better than you and me. Celebrities, they are normal people. They're just you and me. They are good people. Celebrities are normal, good, hardworking people. Why do we follow them? Just because they're holding a sign that says, Follow me. This is how I see it. And you're right, it's about also being suggestive, about people being curious. And all of these things are conceptual. You don't necessarily see them in the actual work itself. You have to think about it. And that is the purpose of conceptual artwork, to make you think, to give you new sight, new visions, new eyes. I will not make any more boring art. I will not make any boring art. I will not make any more boring art. This is very easy. I'm sure you know what's the concept here. You know, in school, when school students are naughty and the teacher put them on, they have to write on the board, I will not do so and so, I will not do so and so 20 times. So that is the concept here. The artist, however, is talking about what he would consider as boring art during his time, 1971. So if you look at it aesthetically, it's not that interesting. Visually, perhaps it's not the most interesting thing, but it's the concept of how we take in a real activity of a child, a student sitting in class and writing on the board, and how he turns it and take the motives, the concept, and bring them into art. I wanted to share with you a few activities. We're not going to do them, a few exercises. I'm going to share them with you in case you're stuck at home now with the lockdown and you want to do it later on with family and friends, so you can do them. So this is an exercise based on that work. And the exercise is to choose a phrase, a sentence, one sentence, and write it 20 times. Simply write it 20 times. And after you've done that, notice whether repetition affects meanings. I think they do. You'll find it interesting. Also, consider whether the process of writing can impact and can change the meanings. So this is a little exercise that you can do at home if you had the time later on. But now we're going to move on into this amazing artist, On Kawara. What you see here is a book that says 1 million years. And the book, the artwork, does exactly what it says. It does what it says on the tin. If you open the book, you will see something really strange. There are 1 million years printed in that book. So again, what can I do with this? It is so useless, so to speak. What can I do with this? On the other hand, if you think about the concept, about what's behind it, it's very profound. Think about millions of years. I'm thinking about the dinosaur era. And then it's all shuffled, bundled up in one book. And you can hold the book from the dinosaurs era, prehistorical era, 1 million years, condense it into your hand, into physical, a single book. So it is the concept and the ability to inspire the viewers. What they actually did in this gallery in 1999, they actually read those 1 million years. Can you imagine these poor 2 people, volunteers, having to read 1 million years? I think by the time they finished reading it, they probably got older, 100 million years older, just by reading it. I don't know how you would do it. So let me ask you again, and type quickly in the chat, what do you think, colleagues? Reading 1 million years in a gallery, what do you reckon? Is that a waste of time, or is that worthy activity? Waste of time, or is it worthy, inspiring? Sitting in a gallery, 1 million years. Alice says it will bore me. Yes, absolutely. A bit of a waste of time. Okay, Susan, I can see the point. I think it's brilliant. But once again, the idea behind it is brilliant. The idea that 2 people would sit and read 1 million years. For me, it's fascinating. It is so different. It is so something that we will not usually do. And that's what makes it so interesting. That's how it opens new perspective, opens new observation. So it is all about what you see here, perspective. Usually we look at something and we say it is square, and that's it. Conceptual art gives you different avenue, different way to look at life. And when you stand here, then you sometimes see that the circle, you know that this cylinder, this shape is multidimensional. It is about opening our eyes, opening our perspectives. Like this work, created by Joseph Kosuth. So what he did, he took a chair, not even a pretty chair, put it in a gallery, boop, came with his camera, took a photo of the chair in that gallery, and printed that photo, put it next to the chair, and then on the right, what you cannot see here, but this is a dictionary definition of a chair. Chair, the real thing, the photograph, the idea, the concept, the thoughts. That is really interesting, because if you look at an object, you can sense the real object, or you can treat it visually only by looking only with your eyes on the photograph, or the chair exists in your mind as an idea, as a definition, a dictionary definition, even if the chair is not there. So that starts to be a bit philosophical and also interesting in that it talks about the human ability to conceive. The artist talks about the idea that remains constant even though the elements keep changing. The metamorphosis of the elements do not change the idea. The next artist, Carl Andre, was famous doing that. Carl Andre, in his work Equivalent 8, which is what you see here, took bricks, just fire bricks you would use to build the wall, and put them in the gallery, and he called it art. Visually, is that interesting? I don't know. But the idea here is that he created a series of a few such sculptures, and they all have different shapes, so he would arrange the bricks slightly differently for each different sculpture. However, all have the same height, the same mass, and the same volume. So like the previous work, you end up with different sculpture, which are all different, but they are also the same. It's the metamorphosis, it is the change of things. That's why he called this series equivalent. They are equivalent in something, even though they are very different in other aspects. So the Tate Britain purchased this work in 1972 for £2,000. I think in today's money it would be something like £30,000. And of course people say, why do you waste so much money for something like this? This is just bricks. It is not just bricks, it is embodiment, it is a tool to inspire, to motivate people to think about concepts, think about ideas. I want to share with you a little secret now. Although Tate paid £2,000, I'm not sure that the artist received £2,000. Could be that £2,000 included shipment. He had to send it from, I don't know where, from the United States. He had to put it in an airplane or in a ship and post it. He had to make insurance. This thing costs money. I'm saying this because even with conceptual art, which is about the concept, the idea, there's a lot of preparation, a lot of materiality, a lot of things involved, the real things, so to speak. What I'm showing you in here is a £10 note, photo of a £10 note. I'm sure you will agree with me that there is a lot of artistic endeavor in the £10 note. What I mean, an artist had to draw the queen, an artist had to draw the building, the symbol here, graphic designer had to design the font, the text. By the way, on one of my other presentations I talk about the anatomy of typography, the actual anatomy of fonts. So someone had to design all of this. So there's a lot of artistic endeavor, artistic and creativity put into designing £10 notes. But my question to you now is different. I'm not asking whether it is art. I would ask you whether do you think this is conceptual art? What do you think, colleagues? Put your suggestion in the chat box. £10 note, money, basically. Is it conceptual art? Can we say it's conceptual art? Yes, Susan say has the potential. Nikki says representation of the currency and what it can be exchanged for, and therefore yes, it is conceptual. And Susan once again, okay, depending on how it is used. And Alice suggested it could be conceptual because it represents value of £10. Yes, and extra design represent extra ideas. Let's have a look. Let's compare £10 note to £5 note, and that will give us the answer. If you look at £5 note, it is not that different to £10 note. Yes, it is smaller. Yes, the ink is blue instead of orange color in the £10. Yes, the design is different. But if you take £5 note and £10 note, they're both the same. They're both printed on plastic paper. You cannot eat £5 note and you cannot eat £10 note. It's not food. If you put £5 notes in the ground in your garden and you put £10 note next to it and you water both of them, they will both not going to grow into a money tree. So what's the value of this piece of plastic? Why £10 note values twice than £5? Yes, I know this one says 10 and this one says 5 and 10 is double 5, but this is just ink. This is just ink on a shape and ink on the paper on the note. What is it that makes it valued twice? In my view, the answer is agreement. Agreement. Human beings, you, me, and other 7 billion people agree. We simply agree that this that says £10 equals to £10 probably means you're going to get £10 equivalent gold if you went to the Bank of England and exchanged your £10 for gold. I think that's how the value started. But that's not practical. Nobody's doing it. We exchange money with each other and we all agree. Money is a pure form of agreement because you and I, we agree that it has value. Therefore, we exchange it. We agree that £10 is twice than 5. Obviously, the mathematics, 10 is double 5. But they're both same paper, same ink. And we agree, and therefore it is so. In that respect, I would argue that money is a very spiritual thing because it's based on concept in the mind. And banknotes, I would argue, they could be conceptual art. They were not designed as art. The purpose is not art, unless you would say buying and selling is an art form. Everything in life could be said to be art form. But that wasn't the purpose. But if I am going to print this slide and I'm going to put it on my wall, I could say that this creation, this new poster, is a conceptual art. Because money is just a concept. It is just an idea. And now we're seeing that conceptual art, like bricks, like someone shaking your hand with a wet paint, is not so different to other conceptual elements in our life, like money, which is so substantial, so important, so real. Well, I'm not sure that it is real. Going back to artist Om Kawara, who was obsessed with dates. What he did here is to create a series which is called the Today series. Here at the top you will see these artworks. Each one represents a different date. These are paintings. This is not Photoshop, this is not computer work. These are real canvas, framed canvas, and the artist will take a brush with paint, dip it in paint, and they will start to draw. He would actually draw those dates. The dates must be drawn in the way that is authentic to the city where he was at that day when he was drawing. So if you look carefully, here it says 5 ABR, it's probably 5 April 1968. So the day 5 is before the month, and below it December. The month is the 1st, and then the day 21st. You can see the variations because they are authentic to the format which is used in the country in the city where he was staying on that day when he made that painting. Also, each painting had to start and finish in 24 hours. He will not allow himself to continue into the next day, because the painting became a tool to record a given date. That was his obsession. If I look at the photograph below, I would say that aesthetically the actual photograph is interesting. I'm looking at those black canvases on the wall. That's interesting aesthetically. That wasn't his point. His point was creating a concept where every day we document ourselves through painting, through writing the dates. The same artist also did another interesting work. Every morning he would take 2 postcards from the city where he was staying, and he would write the hour when he got up. So literally, I got up at 8:43 a.m., as you can see here. I got up at 12. What? Waking up at 12? Yeah, 12 p.m. And he would put the date, his local address where he was staying, and the address of the person that he was sending it to. And he would send that to people. He did it for like 2 years. I got up, documenting the date and the hours that he would get up each morning. It's the concept, it's the idea behind it. I would argue that the ideas haven't changed much. So this was done 50 years ago. It's not different to what we're doing today with our Facebook feed, with the constant documenting ourselves by taking photographs of ourselves, put it in on Facebook. Facebook put timestamp, and you can also put location stamp. Not so different from that. The concept is the same. The tools perhaps change slightly. How interesting, conceptual art. So, if you want to do this exercise at home with the family, with friends, you can base the following exercise on the work of Om Kawara. And what you will do is to go back to postcard. And if you don't have postcard, just cut card in the size of postcard, draw the location, put the date, put the time that you got up, put another message. I call it Facebook message. Hi, I got up, how are you doing? I'm doing this, I'm cooking that, planning to do this. Your address and address of the people you're supposedly going to send it to them. The pure act of writing a postcard with all these elements is interesting today because we don't do it much. Today we're on a Facebook culture. So if you go back to this mechanical thing, you may find it really interesting. So colleague, we are halfway through our presentation. Now I want to show you one of my favorite. Yes, this box, wood box, is one of my favorite. What you see in here is a wood box, not so big, about I think 30 centimeter by 30. So the artist was creating that box from wood planks, from wood panels, and he put a recording tape. That's 1969. Remember the old recording tape? He put it next to the wood and he pressed record. So when he was chopping, the recording tape recorded that sound. When he was sanding, the tape recorded the sound of the sanding. When he was nailing, chop, 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 bang, 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 the tape recording was recording all of that. Then he took the recording tape, put it inside this box, and sealed it, and brought it to the gallery. Wow. What you have in front of you, I mean, I'm laughing just describing it. I think it's hilarious. I'm laughing because I'm loving it. You have a box with the sound of its own making. You come to the gallery, you look at this box, visually interesting? Maybe not. But you look at something right now, the present moment, and you can hear its own past. You can hear the sound of its making. The sound that was recorded 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, a year ago, within that same box. He condensed time and space into one single artwork. The present moment and the past moment are now becoming one. This is hilarious. And it's relevant to this philosopher. This is not an artist. This is a cover of a book called Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant, a Prussian philosopher some 250 years ago, was talking about the concept of time and space. Immanuel was saying that the human brain can only think, can only digest thoughts that are within the concept of time and within the concept of space. So anything that you would think of, anything that would come up into your mind, is bound into the paradigms of time and space. It has to live within time and space. You cannot think something beyond time and space. Maybe you can feel it. But if I have a memory of what happened last week, okay, that was last week in a certain space. I'm bringing you this work, this book cover, this green book cover, not the most inspiring cover. I think if you were to take this work, this box, and put it as the book cover, as the artwork of book cover, I think it would be relevant and interesting. I've read this book, I've read the first 200 pages in English, and I've read the same book, the first 200 pages, about 200 pages, in Hebrew. And I can tell you that both Hebrew and English, very difficult. It is very involved book, very interesting. It's not art, it's about philosophy. So, conceptual art. Time and space condensed. What an interesting experience. What an interesting thought, just to think about this. Past, sound from the past, but I'm seeing something from the moment of now, something which is real now, mixes my senses, my thoughts into one. Thank you, conceptual art. That is a great gift. Thank you. Going further to this conceptual art, what you see in front of you are illustration drawings that my daughter graced my chair. Indeed, here is the chair on the right, and here are the drawings that my daughter drew on that chair. This is a chair I bought in IKEA. It is not one of those cheap 10-pound IKEA chair. No. I paid 95 pounds for that chair. I was very pleased with myself. I brought it home, I fixed it, I assembled it. My daughter thought that it's a beautiful canvas, my little girl. Let's grace it with some drawings. Scribbles. So I'm going to ask you, colleagues, what do you think? How long it took from the moment that I brought this chair, assembled it, and to the moment that my daughter graced it with drawing? How long do you think it took? Give me your wildest guess. Less than an hour? Close? 5 minutes? 5 minutes, or as soon as you were not walking. Alice, do you have children? And Susan says 10 minutes. It was 5 minutes. 5 minutes. As Alice says, I just went outside of the room, I came back, and it was already a Picasso. It was already an artwork. Less than an hour, definitely. Less than 10 minutes. It was 5 minutes. And I don't blame her. Look at that beautiful chair. Look at that beautiful canvas. I would like to paint on it. And the materiality is kind of... it's plastic, pretend to be leather, but it's plastic. But this material absorbs the ink beautifully. You can glide on it. So I don't blame them. I never tell my kids off. I never tell them off when they're doing these things. So what happens if daddy does not tell you off? If daddy does not tell you off, what happens? You will do it again, as you can see here, in the next walk. And I want to show you the evolution from the previous walk. If you look carefully, these are scribbles on my wall. Look carefully at the orange color here, orange pencil, orange crayon. I would argue that it echoes beautifully the orange, brown, gold colors on the floor. You see? Brown, gold, orange, gold, orange. And if you look at the blue here, I would argue that it tries to echo the pattern, you see the butterfly, which is purplish blue. So you have an interesting composition. And if Daddy does not tell you off, you'll do it again. As you can see here, this is a photograph from the wall. I zoomed in, but that's on the wall, and it says 3 plus 1. What is 3 plus 1? Obviously, we know that 3 plus 1 equals 31. Obviously. But I want to show you the evolution here. Now, what my daughter is doing, she is doing her homework, school homework, on the walls. I think this is brilliant. It's a fascinating concept. Why do homework on your notebooks when you can do it on the walls? At that point, I told them, this is great. From now on, we're not going to draw on the wall, we're going to draw on paper, but this is great. Now, I do think it's great, so much so that I wanted to do an exhibition. This is true. I wanted to invite other parents to take photographs of the drawing that their children scribbles on the wall, take photograph, send it to me, write a few words. I will print it big, like 2 meters by 2 meters. And we have a gallery, a small gallery. I converted my back garden garage into a small gallery, beautiful exhibition space, and I wanted to exhibit it there. I even have a title, as you can see, 5D Arts. I call it Kids Drawing Beyond the Canvas. So I've got copy text for a leaflet, and I almost printed a leaflet. The only reason I haven't done it is because it will cost me a fortune to print like 20 poster, 20 print 2 meter by 2 meter. That will cost probably £2,000. So that's the only reason why I haven't done it. But if you think of it, if you take photos of the graffitis, children, paintings on the wall, you take it from the wall, you print it, and you put it back on the wall, this time on an exhibition wall, that's a nice concept, and it will be a beautiful, beautiful exhibition. Does anyone have spare £2,000 they can share and want to do this project with me? If you do, raise your hand. Spare £2,000. Nobody said that conceptual art is cheap. Going further to this conceptual art, the brief here was, it's a bit complex. The brief here was to facilitate the creation of an artwork. So an artwork should be produced not by the student, not by the artist. So the artist should facilitate the condition, but the student, the artist, would not create the artwork by themselves. Someone else has to create the artwork, and that person who creates the artwork should not realize that they're making the artwork. So let me explain. What you see here is a looking from above, 90 degree looking down. The student put marker, 7 marker into the bottom of a door, yes. He put canvas, paper below it. He left it. Then when someone else entered the room, they opened the door, then the marker kind of smudged and created this pattern. So the marker bled into the canvas until someone opened the door. It's beautiful. And that other person who opened the door did not realize that they are making an art. Facilitate an artwork that will be done, created by someone else, and someone else should not even realize that they are creating it. What an interesting concept. What a good idea. And the result is beautiful, beautiful pattern. And there are many symbolism, many conceptual ideas here. The idea is that opening a door is a tool to create art. Or we all artists. Everything is art form. Depends how you look at it. Opening a door could be an art form. Raising your hand. Thinking that you want to raise your hand. The muscles are obeying your thoughts and you move, the door is opening. An artwork. Here it's visualized in this conceptual art. It is the idea that becomes the tool, the machine, that makes the art. The artist is not that important. The final result, is it aesthetic or not aesthetic? That's not important. We have aesthetic art, we love aesthetic art. That's something else. In conceptual art, it's the concept. and it makes you think, it opens your eyes. So colleague, at home, if you wanted, you can actually repeat this project, this exercise, to create other objects in the house. For example, if you are going to make an omelette for your breakfast tomorrow morning, if you're going to make omelette, you'll take an egg, you'll crack it. So how do you crack an egg? You crack it with a knife and then you kind of open it with your hands. So I'm just doing this right now, randomly. So, this action, this movement, is very interesting. I can take a video of this, put it in a loop, put some nice music, and call it conceptual art. Da, 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 da. So, can you make an artwork from the act of cracking an egg? Not necessarily with an egg. So this movement, can you make an artwork? That's an interesting exercise that, if you want it, you can do later at home. I'm going to share with you my last artist for today. This is Richard Serra in his work, which is called To Lift, to Raise. The artist was probably walking down the street and he saw this rubber piece, this rubber material, rubber sheet, I think it's rubber, probably thrown, dumped somewhere, maybe in a construction site. And he said, oh, that's a cheap material I could take for free. So he came to this material, it was probably on the floor, and said, okay, I'm going to take it, and he lifted it. And by purely the act of lifting it, naturally these two shoulders kind of folded into itself, and that's why you see. So he lifted it up, and the rubber sheet kind of folded it. There's nothing mystical, it's purely because of lifting it and gravity. That's what happened with these materials. But then he thought to himself, how interesting that this material responds in a certain way to my act of lifting. So he said, I don't need to think about what I'm going to do with this material. I don't need to think about whether I'm going to paint on it, whether I'm going to carve in it. I would carve in this material, in this rubber. He said, no. It struck me, so he says, that instead of thinking of how the sculpture is going to be and going to look, instead of that, just enact those actions, those verbs on the materials. In this case, the action, he calls it, the verb is to lift. And then sees what happened. And that is the artwork. That is brilliant. This artist is visualizing our actions without creating something new. And so he creates a long list of those actions. He calls them verbs, verb list. He calls them action to relate to oneself. As you can see here, to roll, to crease, to fall, to store, to bend. There is a long, beautiful list here. That's not the original list. His list is handwritten. And I typed it and I put the color, you see the green and the orange, just so it's easier for us to see it. So this is not the original list, it's not how it looks. He handwrote it. And so, here's another work by the same artist. And here I think this one was to tear. It is metal, but he tore it up and that was the result. To roll, to crease, to fall. This is brilliant. So as you can see, conceptual art visualizes concept, gives us insight into new ideas, new perspectives, new visions on life. And colleagues, what I would like to do, I would actually want to do this exercise with you. I want to create something with you in the next 10 minutes. If you wanted. But before that, I just want to announce that my next talk will be about evolution of a line, where I talk about lines, purely lines. I'm not going to talk about the history of art, but the history of line, how line evolved. Also, tomorrow we have a meditation art class for your children. This is for children age 5 and 12. If you want your kids to join, adults are welcome. And another thing, just to announce that, again, tomorrow 10 p.m. on my Facebook page, I'm going to do Reiki meditation. Meditation is like visualization, like watching a film with your eyes closed. Go down the staircase. Cool. Exercise of imagination. But now, if you wanted, I would love to do this Richard Serra project with you, all these verbs. It would be great if you want to choose, let's say, one of Serra's verbs, for example, to roll, to crease, to fold. If you can quickly bring an A4 sheet, I will ask you to enact the verb. For example, if you chose to roll, simply take A4 sheet and roll it. If it is to crease, take your A4 sheet and crease it. And then if you're not shy to open your camera, I will ask you to share it with us and we will need to guess what it was. It's a great exercise. Share it on the screen. What do you think Alice did? To store, to bend, to shorten. There's so many verbs. Show it to us again, Alice, or in case someone missed it. Nikki, you said roll? I think it's to roll again. Is it to roll, Alice? Wow, that's brilliant. To encircle. Fascinating. Excellent, lovely. Thank you. Okay, who wants to go next? Judith, did you have something ready? Any guesses? I see three pieces of a paper. Is that to tear? No, but we can see, yes, beautiful, what I tell you, to weave. Weaving become an art form. But show us the action that you, yes. So we would say it's to tear. Colleagues, thank you very much for today. I shall bid you farewell and I shall say goodbye to everyone.